I actually think I'm doing good. I have the biggest crowd. You're there. You see them. Nobody's ever had crowds like this.
You have enthusiastic supporters, but do you have people beyond that?
We're going to have to see. We're going to have to see.
Even though we're doing fine right now, I'm not taking anybody anywhere for granted. We're going to work hard these next 85 days, and I can't do it without your help.
Let's bring in our panel to talk about the state of the 2016 race today. Zeke Miller, political reporter for Time. Monica Crowley, editor and columnist for The Washington Times. And syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Good to see you all on this Tuesday. Zeke, I'll start with you. They're both making their assessments of how they're doing out there. Trump says he feels good. The polls would say otherwise, and we'll go over a few of those in just a minute. But Hillary Clinton says she's taking nothing for granted, forging ahead, and still fighting for votes.
I mean, that's certainly what she says. We're seeing a little bit of signs of complacency, certainly from some of her supporters, her super PAC coming off air a little bit, at least temporarily, in some of the swing states, Virginia and Colorado, thinking they had that comfortable lead. If some of the polls show that if the election were held today, she has the electoral votes to win. At the same time, Democrats have to turn out their base, and 84, 85 days left to play. There's so much time left. That's sort of their challenge now. Is how do you both act like you're in the lead, but also keep your folks, keep their voters coming out to the polls on November 8th.
Motivated, yeah, because they have to feel in need. Now, let's look at some of the key states and some of the new polling that we have from the Washington Post. In Virginia, looking at a four-way race, because it's not just the top two, but either way, Clinton is well in the lead. But in a four-way race, she is up 46 to 39%. Then you have Gary Johnson at 9% and Jill Stein at 3%. In Florida, very similar numbers there. Clinton is up in a four-way race, 48 to 39% over Trump. Monica, he says he feels good. What do they do to close that gap? Can they at this late stage in the game?
Well, it is possible to turn it around, but time is getting very short. If these are the poll numbers that we have, say, a month from now in mid-September, then Donald Trump is in a world of pain. I'm hearing today that there may be some changes in the Trump campaign, not necessarily in terms of personnel, but in terms of strategy and approach. I think we saw maybe the first indication of that today. He was supposed to do a rally tonight, and instead he's going to give a prepared speech on law and order, which is a key cornerstone of his campaign. So I think over the last couple of weeks, the polls that have trended in Mrs. Clinton's direction in a very significant way have really been the first thing to scare Donald Trump, maybe scare him straight. I don't think he is going to change his personality. I don't think he should. But I do think he needs to change his overall strategy and approach going into this general election. It's one thing to win 13 million votes to win the nomination. It's another thing entirely to need 65 million to win the presidency. He does want to win it. Mrs. Clinton, when she says, I'm not taking anything for granted, of course she needs to take that approach. It would be political malpractice for her to just to sit on this lead. But there are a couple of other elements here. External events. God forbid, a terrorist attack, war breaking out, a recession. And also I think the debates will play a huge role. So there are other elements that are going to come into play, but Donald Trump needs to be proactive now heading into the fall.
Yeah, because we know, Charles, in some states, I mean, they'll begin early voting before we even have the first debate. So there are voters who will be going to the polls and making these decisions well ahead of that. I want to look at a couple of other polls. These also are with the two top candidates. This deals with favorability ratings. The Washington Post poll out of Virginia shows favorable, unfavorable. They're both upside down. Clinton's unfavorable at 54, Trump's unfavorable at 65. Now, the Monmouth, Florida poll shows they both are at 50% or higher there. Again, Clinton at 50% unfavorable, Trump at 54%. Is that a window of opportunity for him? Is there any way, with two of the most unliked candidates in recent political history running for president, that he could somehow capitalize on that?
Look, anybody who's been through these election cycles knows that there is at least one cycle left. The press is always looking for a new story. You can't have the same old story, Trump stumbling, for the next 80-some days. There will be a time, a week from now, 3 weeks from now, it'll happen, in which the headlines will be, is Trump beginning the comeback? His numbers will take up, people will predict it's a swing, and we don't know. And look, he has been incredibly, she has been incredibly lucky. She has had all these slings and arrows thrown at her. The email story, this request for investigation about her lying to Congress, which is a felony. All of these things are happening, and he kept stepping on the story. She is not going to be that lucky all the time. that he's going to step on all of these stories. There will be a time in which they're going to hide him in a box in the Trump Tower, in the attic, and he'll be in there for a couple of days, and these stories will come out, and she will be damaged. So I think there will be a turn. Whether you capitalize on it, I'm skeptical, but I don't believe that we are on a straight line trajectory.
And let's talk about some of those issues because, of course, the chairs of House Judiciary, House Oversight, they're both Republicans, but they've written to the U.S. Attorney here in D.C. asking for an investigation into whether she committed perjury. We have news the State Department's going to turn over a lot more emails than we've seen previous to this. The FBI is turning over materials. Zeke, does it go anywhere? Because as Elijah Cummings, the congressman who's the ranking Democrat, said today, listen, they're just trying to get more headlines. They're trying to detract from what's happening with Trump. It goes nowhere.
Yeah, it's very unlikely that we're going to see any sort of actual criminal this proceeding in any criminal investigation proceeding in any sort of way. But certainly these headlines are very bad for Hillary Clinton. They feed into sort of the general distaste surrounding the way she handled the private email server, the way she talked about that, and misstated sort of the facts about that server for a year and a half now. So all of this is just going to keep that in the news, keep poisoning the well for swing voters potentially for her. I mean, but to Charles's point, I mean, the great thing for Hillary Clinton right now is that she's running against Donald Trump, and that he has consistently sort of missed every opportunity to hit her on that. That won't last for long, but at least for now, she seems to be somewhat insulated from that.
And Monica, there's some nuance to these facts. You really have to understand what the FBI Director Comey said, what Mrs. Clinton has said, what these committees are now saying. Do you think it's sort of lost on the average voter who's not as wonky and dialed in maybe to every twist and turn of this saga?
Well, to Zeke's point, I think it reinforces for the general public an impression that they've had of Mrs. Clinton over the last 30 years, which is that she is deeply corrupt. She doesn't tell the truth. She can't be trusted. But I also think, you know, this referral coming from the House, I'm glad that they did it, and it's nice. But you have the most highly politicized Department of Justice, maybe in the history of the Republic. Started under Attorney General Eric Holder. It continues under this Attorney General Loretta Lynch. And when you have a DOJ that is as controlled by the president as Obama has controlled this DOJ, you no longer have an effective, impartial enforcer of the law. And without an objective enforcer of the law, you have an opening where corruption can fester and grow, and that's what I think we're seeing now. So to the extent that voters have an impression of this, I think overall that's the impression. And whether or not Donald Trump can maximize that and really exploit it for political gain, that's an open question.
All right, we got to leave it there for now.